Let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for our time together today. We pray that you will bless us as we listen to sometimes troubling news, but always remember, as we discuss first hour, that we always have hope, and our joy should always be there, the joy that we have in the Lord. Bless our time together today, in Jesus' name, amen. Well, today we're going to call this What Next? It seems like I'm rolling along, I'm getting everything put together nicely, I'm going to be done in 40 minutes, and then somebody goes and blows up a bridge or blows up a pipeline or something like that. How dare they? So this is what I don't know if I should have a brand, but somebody said, well, maybe this is what your brand should be. Somebody sent me this picture, and I kind of updated it with the prophecy update on the newspaper. Here are some of the channels we're on. We appreciate if you would go to these, like, subscribe, share, whatever. It does help us in the rankings. I don't ask you to do that much. YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, Rumble, Real FBC. Although I will say I like Rumble. I like Rumble because it is pretty much free speech. But I listen to other podcasts and that type of thing, and Rumble just does not work well for me a lot of the time. It's freezes up, it's slow, the videos don't load as quickly. I mean, YouTube's got it down. Google really has done it well, but and then Brighteon, RTN TV, and then our Fellowship Bible Chapel app. And we're going to try to add more content to that in audio podcasts, but please be patient with us because we're a small church. And we just don't have we could always use more volunteers. And those of you who've written to me to volunteer, if I can use you, we will be in touch. And it's been kind of busy. So if you want to hear that we talk about the convergence of events and how quickly things are happening, and we always talk about, these are my grid that I look through, acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding, looking at the verse in Daniel that talks about the fact that at the time of the end, people will understand. And I think this is an indicator that as we get closer to the end, we're going to have a better idea as to exactly how all these prophecies are going to play out. And right now, I'm open to listen to a lot of people with their ideas. I do try to review things that are sent to me if they're succinct and summarized. I've been somebody sent me books one time, and they're about 1,700 pages in the 6 or 7 books. And that may be an underestimate because each book is about 600 pages, and there were about, I think, 5 or 6. I don't know. I try to look through things, and I appreciate that, but I just don't have time to do that. Now, I was on some other podcasts this week. I did Serpents and Doves offhand with my friend Pablo from California. And to be honest with you, I don't remember what we talked about too much because that was before the bridge got blown up. I think we talked a little bit about the pipeline and some other things that are going on. And then Friday morning, I did Stand Up for the Truth with David Fiorazzo on Q90 FM up in Wisconsin. Tomorrow at 4:45 p.m. Eastern, 1:45 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to do an hour or so with Pastor Tom Hughes from 412 Church on his channel. He's also on his channel, but on the church's channel, Hope for Our Times. And we're probably going to talk about the bridge and some other topics. We were kind of texting back and forth, and all of a sudden it's like an hour. We've texting back and forth for an hour, so how long could we talk about it? Because there are just so many issues that come in. So I got the title for this week from this Economist cover, special report on the world economy, what next? I'll save you sort of the the summary is we don't know. We're the World Economist. We're a magazine called The Economist, and we're really not sure what's going to happen. It's going to be, I think, a rather difficult next year, regardless of what happens. We have midterm elections coming up in the United States. I know that some that are conservatives are very hopeful that the composition of Congress may shift to a Republican, quasi-conservative majority in both the House and the Senate. There's a chance that that could happen. But then again, you have to assume that we're going to be voting. And that's not, or voting in a regular fashion. I don't know what's going to happen. I think that some things have happened recently to indicate that people are going to try to swing the election. For example, we know there have been a lot of people from other countries that have been let into the United States. I don't even have any slides on this. I mean, we're talking in the millions now. They've been shipped to a lot of times what you would call red counties, things that would vote Republican or conservative. Some governors, like Governor Abbott in Texas and Governor DeSantis in California, or in Florida, by the way, Florida's not a border state. Why are they getting all these illegal immigrants, migrants? So he started shipping them to New York, and the mayor of New York says, hey, we can't afford these. Don't send them here. We're the most prosperous city in the world, just about. But stay in Texas, right? It's out of control. And you could call what DeSantis and Abbott are doing a political stunt. I think it's effective. And of course, anytime you talk about it, here come the fact checkers. You know, they sent 50 Venezuelans to Martha's Vineyard. And the fact was they brought the National Guard in. After they got all their selfies taken with them, they brought the National Guard in to move them to an army base someplace, even though Martha's Vineyard is a sanctuary area. And of course, now the fact is, no, that didn't happen. Didn't happen. Yes, it did. Watched it. It's funny. I mean, you see these fact checkers. I'm sure you've all run into them. Or you post something, even a quote that would say favor the approved narrative on climate change. And you'll get a post on there like, well, the climate change, it tells you what climate change is, and that's settled science and all this other stuff. Well, that's not what it was. I quoted you. And they're just artificial intelligence bots that do this. I saw a post from a friend just a little while ago on Facebook. She's been a very bad person. She asked for prayer for a friend. Some of you know her here. And she got a community standards warning from Facebook. If you do this, we will take your account down. This violates our community standards. Asking to pray for someone. Listen, when you see stuff like that, it's pretty clear that we're in the midst of a spiritual war. Now, this is something that there's a great website called The Visual Capitalist, and they have all these charts and graphs and everything, and saves me a lot of time. So here's world population supposed to hit 8 billion in the next month. Some of these numbers are off already. I can tell you China does not have 1.45 billion. They even came out with a report that said they overstated their population by about 100 million, and probably 100 million females. I know China would lie. India's growing. And you can see there are a lot of people in the world. But if you look at long term, like 20 years out, world population by most estimates, is going to start to decline. In some countries, particularly in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, it looks like it's going to grow, but we're sort of in the West in a large population decline. You look at those populations in Africa, some of those projected, let's say the Lord tarries and we get to 21, well, some of you get to 2100. I'm fairly confident that I won't be here in 2100. I would be 146. Some of those, like, they're going to have cities that are close to 100 million people based on the way population is growing right now. Although as they get more successful, their populations will decline. Well, I'm going to talk about this for just a little bit because I think this is sort of a defining issue. These are covers of Newsweek magazine back in 2017. Can't believe it's been almost 6 years since this magazine appeared, the Gender Revolution. So, if you've been paying attention, we've been talking about this for a long time. And here's a fairly mainstream publication, National Geographic. I resubscribed to this when I was a kid. I read I knew they believed in evolution and that type of thing. It didn't change my mind, but they had great pictures. And we had this thing starting about third grade, fourth grade. We got a thing called an opaque projector. Do you remember those things? It looked like a small oil drum, and you would put a picture underneath it, and it was the early PowerPoint. So I can remember cutting pictures out with a razor blade out of our National Geographics and pasting them on white paper. I love PowerPoint. I mean, I was doing PowerPoint before, Bill Gates was being designated to invent it, and but this, so they did a special issue then at the same time, January 2017, the Gender Revolution. So Matt Walsh did a great series on Vanderbilt Hospital recently, showing that they had been doing some surgeries on minors, gender surgeries like top surgeries. A top surgery is where you remove someone's breast. A bottom surgery, you remove male genitalia or create male genitalia. And in some cases, they did these on minors, 16 years old. And they're fine with it. I mean, they have videos up talking about how they do that, and this is great. Well, then Vanderbilt got caught, so they took down their website. And they actually did come out this week and announce that they were probably going to review gender-affirming surgeries for minors. And they're going to pause them for a while. But the battle's not over, as Matt Walsh said today. But here's another hospital that's doing it. This is the gender clinic at Barbara Bush Children's Hospital, Maine Medical Center in Portland, Maine. And they have a thing called the Gender Clinic. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do those people there on the pictures that do those look like people who've reached the age of 18? The silhouettes. Let's be honest. Maybe one in the middle. This thing is all over the place. You saw the stories about Hilliard School District where they had teachers with name badges, and on the back of the name badge was a QR code that would take you to the NEA the National Education Association sex information thing. And the front of the badge had the rainbow colors, "We care." And then they would direct kids, and they got caught. And so they're saying, well, we're not trying to direct the kids there. It's for adults. Well, wait a minute. How many adults are in your classroom scanning the QR code on your name badge? How stupid do you think we are? And the answer is they think you're pretty stupid. So that this clinic, it talks about some of the things that they do. Here's some of the brief individual and fair individual and family therapy. Why would you want this to be brief? By the way, didn't we have a big hoo-ha in this country about gender mutilation that was taking place in certain countries where there was a majority religion? It's interesting. There were a lot of people on the left that didn't really object. They didn't really join in those protests too strongly because of this. But you want this to be brief family therapy, individual therapy, when these are life-changing decisions? Consultation with spiritual care. I have a chaplain. You'll get the spiritual care. Now, what do you think the spiritual care is? I'm going to read to you what the Lord said about God made them male and female. Do you think that's part of their spiritual care? Look at what they're doing. Menstrual suppression, stopping unwanted pregnancies, puberty blockers, way to stop puberty hormones. And they don't know the long-term effect of these things. Gender-affirming hormone therapy, surgical consultation. Our treatment philosophy, we support each child and young adult by accepting them without judgment and letting their gender identity and expression unfold over time. We have a gender affirmative approach to treatment. We do not approve of any kind of conversion therapy. We believe that trying to change a person's gender identity is harmful. Now, this is interesting. This is, I think, Dennis Prager's the first person I heard say that. In the United States, gender identity and sexual orientation is fixed. It is in bedrock, and it cannot be changed. But your biological sex can be. Now, to me, that would seem to be, that's really conversion therapy. When you start changing a male into a female, or what they think is a female, but the DNA never changes. Personally, I think the whole thing is insane. I think there are some people who are deeply troubled by this. They need prayer, they need counseling, they need help. But you have people like, I can't remember, it was Peter or Paul McHugh, who was the chief psychiatrist at the transgender clinic at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And he wrote an article many years ago in the Wall Street Journal, you can still find it, that said, we studied these. And now they always say, well, if you don't do this, they're all going to go commit suicide. But what did the study that they did at Johns Hopkins show? It showed that if they did the gender reassignment surgery, people didn't like the results. And they were 19 times more likely to commit suicide than they had been if nothing happened. And they found that in above 95% of the cases, if they just worked with the person over time, they eventually got over it. But that wouldn't work very well in today's day and age because, they might actually go out and have children. So we have to do you think anybody that has these surgeries is able to get pregnant? But they refer to them as birthing persons all the time. It's just crazy. And then here's some, these are PDFs that you can download from the website, at least you could the other day when I did it. Here's one, Patient Education, the Guide to Safe Tucking. And what that is, if you look through the brochure, you will find that if you are a male, this is a way to tuck your male genitalia so you don't look like a male. And so this is fine. They give this to families and kids. Now, you might want to be careful because, they talk about tucking too tightly. I think the people that are doing this are not wrapped too tightly, shall we say. Here's one. This is from another one. This is referred to in a lot of school websites, safer tucking. Look at the one up there. Duct tape is not recommended. This is one from the Trans Hub. This is Health and Gender Affirmation in New South Wales. This is a big deal that they're having a big debate about this in the UK right now. If you write about it and you're negative towards it, your university will fire you. J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, I'm no fan of that, but she's been standing up for these, I think she calls them transgender terrorists or something, or anti-feminist transgender terrorists. And there's a lot of back and forth about that. She's kind of in a Twitter war with Nicola, I don't know how you say her, Nicola Sturgeon, who's the Prime Minister of Scotland. And she says, listen, I don't support this. She has a T-shirt, Nicola Sturgeon, destroyer of women's rights. And so now Sturgeon came out and said, well, I'm in favor, I support all of this stuff. I read a study this week. It was a sociology study. And in that sociology study, the person had said, it was a study of like, how did we get here? How did we get all of these people opposed to this wonderful thing that we do for children? And it's clear they're doing it for children. They're not saying it's people over the age of 18. They said, we're doing this for children, gender affirming care. And so it was a sociologist from some university. And anyway, he concluded, this is very much like, this is all of the people that oppose this, they're just spreading, what's the word? Misinformation and disinformation. And it's very much like the disinformation concerning a certain protest that occurred in early January 2021 in the nation's capital. And they're all cut from the same cloth, and we've got to stop them. And this is a research article. I don't have too much on this. This is some pictures of Fort Myers Beach. We have some friends who live just down the street from one, I think this, well, theirs may be out of the way. Here's just a little drone footage of some of the stuff. This is Fort Myers Beach. We have some people who live near the bridge there, the causeway. That's the former pier at Fort Myers Beach. They had an area called Times Square. It's pretty much gone. It's interesting, though. I think people thought they were going to make this an election. Oh, yeah, we're going to get DeSantis now. He's going to fail. I have another video somewhere of the bridge to Pine Island. They said it would take months to a year. And they had pictures of repair trucks waving flags driving across it this week. Sanibel's going to take a while. Just incredible devastation there. It will be a while till everything is rebuilt. And it's a big problem for people because these were, Cape Coral and Fort Myers were two of the fastest growing areas in the country last year in terms of people moving there. And now there's a lot of people who have no homes or anything because they're just gone. And then there's a shortage of homes in Florida. It's a big problem. So people need a lot of prayer and help and assistance. And I think I've heard that, I think it was 40% might have flood insurance to cover the damage. So, and I think the death toll's over 100 now. And I don't think they still know how many, because they go to look at a house like that. They don't know if the person's there or not, or left or stayed. And they got to pick it apart in a careful manner so nobody gets injured. It's a big problem. The economy is in tatters. Markets continue to go down. They go up a little bit, then they go down. I think that the world economy is going to be in a difficult position for the foreseeable future. This is an editorial in today's New York Times. The first global deflation has begun. Everything is all messed up. I mean, usually when markets down, bonds are up, but everything just seems to be cratering at this time, and it's very difficult to know what to do with your money to protect it. The advice is conflicting. And it's not in a political season where we are going up to elections. People don't want to talk about the bad economy and how people may end up suffering. This is what you're going to see a lot of stories like this. Memory chip demand dries up. So we're building a big Intel chip plant out here. Now, I don't think it's memory chips, but everybody's like, well, here's a memory chip, and there's a shortage, and now there's a surplus. And demand for them is cratering, just like demand for a lot of things is going down, particularly when you get into clothes and department store goods and that type of thing. Inventories are way up. There are ships available now that weren't available. China continues to do the locking down, 20 million plus cities, cities with 20 million plus people. And that affects supply and demand. This is a story from Risk Climb on U.S. as U.S. eases price at pump by tapping reserve. Now, this article was written, I think it came out on Friday a week ago. So Monday I had to go up by Cleveland. On the way up, I noticed, well, I'm going to need gas on the way back. It was on the freeway exits where it's higher here in Ohio. It was $3.49 a gallon. I was buying it 2 weeks ago for $2.69 a gallon. At the, I think Sheetz had a little bit of a gas war down there at Polaris with the stations around there trying to drive them all out of business, which I think is great, while they continue to do it. Eventually they, figure they're not going to drive them out of business, so they raised the price back up. But I came home in the evening, so I drove up about 10 a.m. up Interstate 71. I came home at about 9 p.m. and the prices were $3.99. They'd gone up 50 cents that day. So much for tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which the president has been doing. Why? Why is he driving down prices? Because he wants to look how I'm driving down prices because I'm president and you should vote for my party. And it's all fake. Plus, the thing is, when under the Trump administration, when they filled up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is for when we get into like a war, okay, which seems to be more likely now more than ever. So they've drained over half of it. That was filled up at the cost of about $24 a barrel. Now oil was in the 70s, but I'll talk about it in a minute. Prices are going to go up. And so if we want to refill that, now we have to refill it at $100 a barrel or whatever. The whole thing, it's just, you kind of get the impression that people maybe aren't working with our best interest at heart. 6 major banks have joined a study on exposure to climate risk. This is social credit. This is from the Federal Reserve, where they talk about the Federal Reserve on Thursday announced that 6 of the nation's largest banks will participate in a pilot climate scenario analysis exercise designed to enhance the ability of supervisors and firms to measure and manage climate-related financial risk. Scenario analysis, in which the resilience of financial institutions is assessed under different hypothetical climate scenarios, is an emerging tool to assess climate-related financial risk, and there will be no capital or supervisory implications from the pilot. Yeah, right. It's going to lead to a social credit system based on your climate usage. It's coming everywhere you look, digital currencies and that type of thing. The banks in the pilot exercise include JP Morgan Chase. Now, PayPal came out the other day and said, we're updating our terms of service as of November 3rd. And one of the things in the November 3rd is we have these acceptable use policy. If you violate acceptable use policy, we will go into your accounts. And the way I read it, even you have to link a credit card to these accounts. Go into your credit card and we'll charge you $2,500 per violation as liquidated damages for violating our acceptable use policy. And so this is the acceptable use policy here. And here's one of the things that you could do. Do something in social media that is fraudulent, promotes misinformation, or is unlawful. So if you did that, PayPal was going to say, we're going to fine you at our discretion, solely on our discretion, we will fine you $2,500 from your account. So you know what happened? Thousands of people canceled PayPal. So PayPal came out and they issued a statement yesterday and said, somebody hit publish on a acceptable use policy, and it was supposed to be internal, and we never intended for that to go public. So now what do you know? PayPal lies. That's what they do. But part of this is based on misinformation. So here is a World Economic Forum seminar discussion that took place, I think it was this week, on tackling disinformation. And they had one of the climate people from the UN there. I want you to listen to the lead up to it, because they're talking about what do they want to do with social media and information that's posted there. So there's two videos I want you to see on this. So here's, I can't remember her name, talking at the Tackling Disinformation, the Sustainable Development Project meetings, tackling disinformation, and it says World Economic Forum over there.
I think that's a really important point. And Melissa, I mean, to some extent, what you just heard from Rachel there about the speed at which users interact with platforms is so much faster even than the platforms themselves can manage or understand. It seems that, when we saw the beginning of these platforms, there was a lot of hope about global communities, about everyone having a chance to share lovely pictures of their families and friends, and none of the kind of discussion about the darker side of what could happen. And TikTok is a new platform, famous for dancing videos and showdowns of people singing and that kind of stuff. But it's also very susceptible to exactly what you've been talking about in the disinformation, misinformation space. So how do we balance that thing of seeing these platforms suddenly emerge from nowhere and get the users who, some of them with bad faith, bad intention, and sometimes state-sponsored, jumping in with this kind of bad content? How do we deal with that? And how do you deal with that at the UN?
I mean, I agree with everything that Claire and Rachel said about the phenomenon, and also that I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's an astonishing number of young people who get their news from TikTok and no other place. So the responsibility then with that knowledge of that TikTok has is huge. It's even more. And if there is that much mis and disinformation traveling on the platform, obviously they need to do more to address it, but also to educate. But I do think we as news organizations, we as institutions, also have a continued responsibility to inform the world about the state of our world, to guide the public. And unfortunately, like, for example, the UN, I was astonished to learn from my social media colleagues that we fall under a category called civic institutions, which means our starting point, we're downranked. So our starting point is down here, whereas Joe, conspiracy theorist, can start here. And so Facebook tries to address this by giving us ad credits so that we can then come back and be at the same place that whoever wants to say anything person is. But it is an algorithmic shift that was deliberately taken to favor individuals over institutions. And the institutions who are there to serve the public for good are at a disadvantage. We are also, though, have to get better at communicating in these spaces. And I think the humans who are, running our governments, our public health institutions, also need to be more human in their communications, because that's what functions well on social media
How
channels.
about truthful?
It is, it's educating, it's hopefully elevating the content that, we partnered with Google, for example. If you Google climate change, you will, at the top of your search, you will get all kinds of UN resources. We started this partnership when we were shocked to see that when we Googled climate change, we were getting incredibly distorted information right at the top. So we're becoming much more proactive. We own the science, and we think that the world, should know it, and the platforms themselves also do. But again, it's a huge challenge that I think all sectors of society need to be very active in.
So here is one of our favorite people in the world, both of them, two of our favorite people in the world, Emmanuel Macron and Jacinda Ardern, who is I think the president of France and the prime minister of New Zealand, at a news conference in New York on September 20th, a couple weeks ago, talking about misinformation, disinformation, and what the UN can do to control that big problem. So the people that seem to be the least trustworthy in the world want to control what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're seeing. So that's why, Fellowship Bible Chapel and others are setting up their own apps. I do have a Telegram channel, John Haller 54. I'm going to probably start posting more there. I may develop another one. Some people asked me to do one where there was interaction, but I need a moderator to kind of weed out, some of the inappropriate comments that come. So we're going to try to get that set up. So if you were the people who wrote to me about that, I will be in touch with you when I get some time. And so here's Jacinda Ardern last Friday, a week ago Friday, at the UN in New York, speaking about this. Now, this is a little bit longer clip, and I know it's torturous, but you need to listen very carefully to what she says and how she says it, because she and the World Economic Forum and people like Emmanuel Macron are driving the agenda on this. And so, we thought when we fired the propaganda Nandy and Scary Poppins from the Department of Homeland Security, or she resigned, I guess, she was forced out. Well, everything's okay, right? Well, it's not okay, because they're still doing the same thing. They just don't have a public face like, what was her name? Nina Jankowicz. So here's Jacinda Ardern at the UN General Assembly.
We will remain a strong and passionate advocate for efforts to address the weapons of old. But we'll also be an advocate to address the weapons that are new. After all, the face of war has changed, and with that, the weapons used. The tools used to challenge the statehood of others are hidden and more complex. Traditional combat, espionage, and the threat of nuclear weapons are now accompanied by cyber attacks, prolific disinformation, and manipulation of whole communities and societies. Now, as leaders, we have never treated the weapons of old in the same way as those that have emerged. And that's understandable. After all, a bullet takes a life. A bomb takes out a whole village. A lie online or from a podium does not. But what if that lie, told repeatedly and across many platforms, prompts, inspires, or motivates others to take up arms, to threaten the security of others, to turn a blind eye to atrocities, or worse, to become complicit in them? What then? This is no longer a hypothetical. The weapons of war have changed. They are upon us and require the same level of action and activity that we put into the weapons of old. We recognize the threats that the old weapons created. We came together as communities to minimize these threats. We created international rules, norms, and expectations. We never saw that as a threat to our individual liberties. Rather, it was a preservation of them. The same must apply now as we take on these new challenges. In New Zealand, we deeply value our right to protest. Some of our major social progress has been brought about by hekoi, or people power, becoming the first country in the world to recognise women's right to vote, movement on major Indigenous and human rights issues, to name but a few. Upholding these values in a modern environment translates into protecting a free, secure, and open internet. To realize all of the opportunities that it presents in the way we communicate, the way we organize, the way we gather. But that does not mean the absence of transparency, expectations, or even rules, if we correctly identify what it is we are trying to prevent. And surely we can start with violent extremism and terrorist content online. We're also focused on prevention, understanding the interactions between online environments and the real world that can lead to radicalization. This week we launched an initiative alongside companies and nonprofits to help improve research and understanding of how a person's online experiences are curated by automated processes. This will also be important in understanding more about mis- and disinformation online, a challenge that we must, as leaders, address. Sadly, I think it's easy to dismiss this problem as one in the margins. I can certainly understand the desire to leave it to someone else. As leaders, we're rightly concerned that even the most light-touch approaches to disinformation could be misinterpreted as being hostile to the values of free speech that we value so highly. But while I cannot tell you today what the answer is to...
Okay, so another 30 seconds would be equivalent to waterboarding, and we don't waterboard here around here. We come close a lot of times at Fellowship Bible Chapel, but we're going to have mercy and end that. But you see how she's talking about we as leaders need to do this, and we value free speech so highly. Sky News posted parts of this video in a little analysis that they did in Australia, and they said, it was like the queen of fake empathy speaks at the UN and that type of thing. And remember, this is the person back during the days of Charlie Vector 019er. This is the attitude that Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern expressed about, well, what you need to know.
The most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear, covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. We will provide information frequently. We will share everything we can, everything else you see, a grain of salt. And so I really ask people to focus.
The most egregious example of that appears to be this text which originated in Malaysia and has become a viral hoax in Australia and in New Zealand. How irresponsible is it the people that are sharing that news of a lockdown imminent in New Zealand?
Yeah, and look, that's the kind of thing that adds to the anxiety that people feel. So I continue to share the message. New Zealanders must prepare, but do not panic, prepare. And when you see those messages, remember that unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. And I really...
So she values free speech highly, right? She's a hypocrite. You know, during one of the spikes in the Charlie Vector thing in New Zealand, she was supposed to get married and she had to cancel her wedding because of the restrictions. And my reaction to that was, there's a really lucky guy in New Zealand. I mean, he really skated on that one. Now, I don't know if they eventually got married or not, but it's a problem. Here's something regarding this. I have a much more detailed thing, and I'll throw it into a presentation. But they published something a couple years ago about, you know, how are we supposed to manage climate and flying? And nations agree to curb emissions from flying by 2050. I think this is from the New York Times this morning. Curbs on air travel may be needed. Now, that was in a think tank publication, and people looked at it and said, that's insane. They're going to tell us whether we can fly or not? The answer is, yeah. Today in the newspaper, they're talking about it. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about a country called Russia. This is a video that sort of goes through. You can find on online. You can find a more complete copy of this on YouTube called the Russia's Gas Catastrophe. So the green is oil, the yellow is gas, and it shows the pipelines, how they get to Europe and where they end up. So you can see that Ukraine has been a big part of getting Russian gas to the markets for many years, and then also through Belarus. So Europe gets about, I might have a slide on this later, about 65% of its gas, natural gas, on an annual basis from Russia. And it also goes down through Ukraine, and then we have Nord Stream 1 and 2, which are offline, and a lot of different opinions on that. KT McFarland says Russia did it. Other people think that the US did it. And the question, too, I think is more, what's more germane to that is, yeah, somebody blew up the pipelines, okay? And you can make the case that it was the United States or somebody acting like a deep state actor, acting with some funding from the United States or Ukraine that did it. So Russia, through each of the Nord Streams, Russia was transferring, well, through Nord Stream 1, they were transferring 55 billion cubic feet per year to Europe. And their Nord Stream 2 was going to also transfer 55 billion cubic feet, but that never came online. And so when Biden said that back in February, Nord Stream 2 never started up, never transferred a cubic meter of gas to Europe through Nord Stream 2, and they spent billions building it. So look, the evidence is, I think, more likely that the United States did it, but you can make the case that there are reasons for Russia. But the problem with Russia is, so now effectively Ukraine shut down, Nord Stream shut down. They don't really have a way except to go down through Turkey to get gas to Europe. So they could try to sell to other, and they're trying to sell to other places, but they don't really have any pipelines to China. They're building some from Western Siberia, that area there just to the left of the Russia name. They're trying to get that down to China, but those pipelines aren't really going to come online for a couple of years. So right now we have a problem is Europe effectively has 155 billion cubic foot shortfall in gas. They have to make that up. Layer on top of that this week, this sort of shows how the price of crude oil has kind of gone up and down. And then they tie it to some of the things that are going on in Russia. And Russia is essentially, as you can see from the massive gas and oil fields that they have, Russia, some people say, is a country or gas station with a country attached to it. And that's how they make their money. Their economy is not huge. I think it's about 1.6 trillion GDP. And the biggest part of that is gas. So now Russia, the gas price was going up and it was helping Russia, but now they just don't have everything in place. And it's interesting, back in 2018, at the G20, there was a meeting, Vladimir Putin and the relatively new Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he'd been named Crown Prince in the latter part of 2017. They met at the G20, and this is what the exchange looked like as they got together. Hey, bro, how you doing? Okay, man, yeah. So, hey, Vlad, did you hear the one about, yeah, I heard that one. That's funny. So they get along, and anyway. So 2019, the world according to the world in 2019 by The Economist, it's sort of a predictive paper that's put out. And this one was kind of interesting because the cover, everything was a mirror image. You had to look at it in a mirror to see what it says. And that has kind of an occult aspect to it. And some people think that, these are the elites that are controlling the world and this is predicting what they're going to do. But it's interesting. So if you look at the cover in reverse, you can begin to see what they're talking about. So here's one part. This is a stork delivering a baby with a barcode. So do you understand the digital identity thing? And this was being pushed. This was late 2018 when this was published. And then they had this part. And if you look down at the bottom between Putin's profile and the panda, you have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I mean, it's a secular publication. So don't think that it's just, nuts like me that talk about this stuff. This is imagery and things that the people who really are tied into Davos and the World Economic Forum, they're thinking like this. But Putin, what do you see there? Putin's pipelines. So now we have 2 pipelines blown up. And now this week, the OPEC Plus, which includes Russia, Saudi Arabia, they meet and they agree on a proactive reduction to output. This is a cartel. If companies got together like this in the United States, they would be sued immediately for antitrust violations. But because they're big political entities, we really can't sue them. And understand that across the world, new exploration for gas because of green energy and people pushing ESG, environmental, social, and governance ideas on companies. And the 2 biggest pushers of that are countries that are ruled by these 2 guys, the Saudis through the Financial Innovation Investment Initiative Innovation Institute, and the Saudis and the Russians through their St. Petersburg conference are been some of the biggest proponents of ESG. And what's the result of that been? The result of that is that it's shut down new gas production like 60 to 80% across the world, in a world where the population is now hitting 8 billion people. That doesn't work. It has so much impact. Gas and oil vital to everything. Fertilizer. If you don't have gas, you don't have fertilizer. And so in the Netherlands and Europe, fertilizer companies next year are going to produce 1/3 of the fertilizer that they did last year. What does that have an impact on? That impacts crops. Modern seeds don't grow and produce as much without fertilizer. And Russia has been known to fund the ESG groups here in the United States. So they're cutting production to get the price of oil and gas back up. And as as the Financial Times said, New York Times, it's a jab at the West. And the Financial Times in yesterday's newspaper said that it is the new oil war. And so if the attack on the pipeline was an act of war, the cutting of production at this time is an act of war. The world is in the state of war. There's just not a lot of fighting. So now let's go to the bridge to Crimea. In 2018, this is Vladimir Putin. He wasn't working a different job. He was doing this for show, by the way. And so the Ukrainians have taken the video of this and they've kind of made up this, like, here's Vlad and the boys driving across the new Kerch Strait Bridge. And, we're going to do this. This was scary. I think if you watch here, they sort of imply that this explosion, this was in Putin's truck. But you understand this is satire and that type of thing. But this is the first group of people driving across the bridge. And here's what happened the other night. An explosion occurred on this bridge. It's a very important bridge. This comes at a time where Russia's having some. I think if you try to be objective about it, you have to admit Russia's been having some problems in Ukraine. They were talking like we're going to roll over these people in a few days, a week, maybe 2 weeks, And that hasn't worked out. Ukraine's taking back territory. Russia's calling up maybe 500,000 troops, going to train them and get them to the front. I don't think what Ukraine is doing, if I try to be objective about it, is sustainable. Russia method of war, I saw this morning the town around that big nuclear plant, the largest nuclear plant in Europe. Russia's just obliterating it. That's what they've done. Like Mariupol, 90% of the city is destroyed. I mean, it's just trashed. That's how the Russians fight wars. That's what they did in Chechnya. This morning I saw a video. Now, I don't know if it's true. I saw this warlord from Chechnya. Now, understand, back in about 2002, you remember the attack on the school by the Chechen Muslim terrorists, and what, 200 and some, 300 children and other people died in that? It was horrible what they did. It was just awful. So Russia went in and it's like they destroyed the city of Grozny in Chechnya. And the leader at that time was a Chechen rebel. And he eventually became sort of an ally of Vladimir Putin. He died. His son has now succeeded to the leadership. And I saw him walking around, and they're talking sending 70,000 Chechen soldiers to Ukraine. Ukraine, whatever population they had of 40 million, it's probably down to around 22 million people. People have left. I just don't think Ukraine can sustain it. But I don't know that Russia's doing all that well. So to supply the troops for Russia, they built this bridge. It's 2 lanes in each direction, and then a rail bridge across the Kerch Strait between Russia on the right and the Crimean Peninsula on the left. And Russia has always had a big warm water port at Sevastopol. Here's a picture of the bridge. And that bridge was effectively destroyed. It opened up in 2018. And this is from the Wall Street Journal at the time. It was a bridge that Russia was going to control this sea passage to the Sea of Azov. And they started immediately cutting off the flow of goods in and out of Ukraine. Crimea, back in 2014, was taken over by Russia. It's called Kerch after the Kerch Strait. The bridge is about 12 miles long. They spent about $4 billion building it. The War Zone, which does defense analysts, the U.S. said back in July of this year that the bridge was a fair game to be attacked. Here's an article. This is from a Russian newspaper. Here's the translation about that. Somebody had got on and talked about it. One of the things they talked about was the bridge cannot be attacked. The bridge is safe. And they have this graphic that they put in the article that they published online. And you can see it's got planes and drones and jets and artillery. We've got the whole thing protected. Now, Russia said this was purely a civilian bridge. So here's a video that somebody found from recent times. And what do you see going across the bridge on the railroad part of the bridge? I'm not a military expert, but those look like tanks to me and troop carriers and armored vehicles. So here's another picture of the bridge. Kind of reminds me of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge down between St. Petersburg and Bradenton, Florida, there at the mouth of Tampa Bay. We drove across that a few weeks after it had been hit in a storm, and the one span had completely collapsed, and 60 people died, most of them on a Greyhound bus that fell 200 feet into the ocean. And so what happened was the bridge got attacked. These are the headlines from this morning. The Wall Street Journal will have this as a headline tomorrow. And this is a very vital supply route. This is the only really good rail route that Russia has to supply troops in the southern part of Ukraine, where a lot of the fighting is going on. There's some other rail lines, but there's no roads, really. there are some roads, but they're limited, and Russia's lost a lot of trucks. I think they've even taken to using some vans and other things to get troops and things to feed the troops and supply the troops. They're using like a rental car bus that you would ride at the airport to get to the rental car lot. They're using that, and you just can't. It's not a good way to supply your troops, because we have roads in the United States because we have these great crops and we get really good prices for our crops. And in Russia, because of being north, they have crops and they grow a lot of wheat, but it's not the best wheat in the world, and they don't get the best price for it, so they don't build a lot of roads to transport it. It's just they don't have a road network like we have in the United States. I mean, you can get anywhere in the United States and get on a freeway pretty quickly and drive. I mean, even out in the middle of in Wyoming and South Dakota last year, and there's not a lot of people out there. Like Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota have about as many people as the city of Columbus and the suburbs. And the country, it's big country. I mean, we're talking 500 miles across the state as opposed to 250 miles across Ohio. So it's big country, a lot of roads to get places, and a lot of goods moved by roads in the United States. They just don't have that. In Russia, they have to use rail, and Russia has always been oriented to moving things by rail. But now this rail line, part one bridge, is a rail line. And you can see, so here's another picture of it. So here's the explosion on the left. They say it was this truck driving down and it exploded. The way the explosion goes, I just don't think it was a truck. Here's a picture of what happened from another angle. There's security cameras. But this was a very sophisticated attack. So it took out several spans of the bridge. And it wasn't just where the explosion occurred, which leads a lot of people to think this was a very sophisticated special forces type attack. And they had explosives planted under the bridge, because a truck exploding would make a hole, and it did make a hole. The spans kind of got lifted up and collapsed. So here's, like, for example, here's a video of the explosion, and some people think that you can see something in a wave. There's a bunch of fake videos out there right now. I saw a picture of the span, and somebody had photoshopped in Putin's long table there leading up to the drop-off. This is kind of an interesting video, though. The sophistication of this is that there was a train going by at the time of explosion. The train, it hit the train where the train was carrying fuel oil in railroad cars. And they caught on fire and burned. Now, do you remember when they had that tanker crashed under the freeway interchange down there at 270 and Interstate 70? And it melted the bridge, remember? And that was closed down. They said it was going to be closed down for months, but it was only closed down for a couple weeks, I think. And Russia's gone out, and they've already opened up the traffic in the non-damaged lanes. And so there's some limited traffic going across the bridge. I don't know that they had a repair crew out there for the rails. And so this sort of is like the pipeline thing. But look at the damage here. I mean, these spans are going to take a while to rebuild. If you remember with Sunshine Skyway Bridge down in Florida, that was 20 years before they got that thing, the new bridge built. And it's a huge bridge, that's why. But you can see that now somebody had to, either somebody is like the most, Dimitri, did you blow up the bridge? Yeah, I did. I blew up the bridge. I hit boom on my computer and it blew up. Dimitri, did you know there was a train? I am the luckiest guy. I'm going to go buy a lottery ticket. I'm so lucky because I hit the train going by. So this is sort of a Google Earth zooming in on the, I think it zooms in. Yeah, here we go. zooming in on where this is. You can see that little red dot, that's the bridge to kind of give you a perspective. But that's the only bridge that they have in the rail line to get their stuff into Crimea, which may or may not be largely Russian. So it's a phenomenal bridge. I mean, Russia was very proud of it. It was a big deal when it opened 4 years ago. And here it is. You can see where that red dot is the span that blew up. And see, so the interesting thing is, so that's interesting on this is, so here's the truck going here and it blows up here and the train is going here a whole 2 lanes away, 3 lanes away from the truck, and they catch that train on fire. Here's a little closer shot. So here goes the truck, boom, and the train's right there. So it made a big mess. It made a big mess. So this is a satellite view. So you can see where the truck was in the right-hand lane going from left to right, and the train's all the way over here across 3 lanes of traffic and an open space, and somebody got the train. Very sophisticated. So this is the ships were backing up a little bit. They're moving through though. I've seen some going through. The Ukrainians put out a stamp. I think they took credit for it today. And Russia's mad. Here's from Sky News Australia, about a 3-minute clip. I think this is pretty good analysis of what happened.
Joins me now. And Michael, it's great to have you here. Some major developments this morning. What do you think has happened here?
Yeah, it's a big story, Vanessa. The Russian claim that it was a vehicle that exploded on the bridge is ridiculous. I mean, if it was an explosion, it would have gone upwards, not come from underneath, and you can't get that much stuff into a vehicle going over a bridge. I mean, bridges are designed to withstand accidents of that sort. This is either a missile, which would be a missile heavier than the Ukrainians are supposed to have, or a special forces operation to sabotage the bridge with explosives underneath, in which case they'll be making Hollywood films about this for some time to come, because it was a huge victory, if it's a special forces victory, to actually get explosives under a bridge of that magnitude in the middle of an area that the Russians are guarding very, very severely and very carefully. So whatever it is, it's a big hit, either a big missile or a big special forces operation. And although the Ukrainians will not claim it yet, it's a huge victory for them, similar to the sinking of the Moskva, the flagship in the Black Sea. It's a big blow to the Russians in that respect.
Absolutely. I guess the key question here is, why has this particular bridge then been targeted? And also, as you were saying, I mean, you've alluded to some of that, but what is the significance then for Ukraine?
Trains coming the other way.
The significance is the importance of the bridge. I mean, until this bridge was built, it was opened in 2018 by Mr. Putin to great fanfare. It was the only link between Russia proper and Crimea that didn't go through Ukraine. And so the only way that the Russians could keep Crimea directly supplied was via that bridge. Before the bridge, it was just a ferry, the Kerch ferry, which used to run like every 2 hours and just take a few vehicles. It was a very small link. So that bridge was vital. And of course, it's been vital in war supply, because it was the line through which the Russians easily got their equipment into Crimea and out to the Kherson region. Now, with the bridge down, and it won't be down forever, but with the bridge down, the Russians have now got to rely on stuff from Berdyansk and Mariupol. So they've got to take things effectively by sea to Mariupol and Berdyansk, and then use the one decent rail line, which is coming within range now of Ukrainian artillery. So Russian supply lines into Kherson will be affected by this in quite a big way. However, this is temporary. The Russians will repair the bridge for sure. And if the Ukrainians could have hit the rail bridge more strongly than they obviously did, then that would be better for them. But to bring the road bridge down is a tremendous achievement, and to damage the rail bridge is still pretty good. My guess is that this will give the Ukrainians maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks until this is all repaired, of advantage, where the Russians will find it really difficult to get any more equipment into the Kherson region, where they're already in trouble.
Absolutely. And I think most people then will be wondering, what impact will this then have on Putin and the war moving forward?
It's a big one, because Mr. Putin opened this bridge in 2018 to great fanfare. And of course, for him, this was the symbol of the fact that Crimea was now Russian. Crimea had been conquered in 2014, had been annexed by Russia illegally, and the idea of linking Russia directly to Crimea via the bridge was a way of saying this, of course, is now Russian, no question about it. So he put his prestige on the line by saying that. He never thought he would have to go back on it. And, given the fact that the Memorial Institute, Sakharov's Institute, was awarded the Peace Prize yesterday, the Nobel Peace Prize, and this overnight, it hasn't been a great 70th birthday celebration for him, one way or another.
Not at all. Major setback for him, isn't it?
Indeed.
Michael, thank you.
Coincided with Putin's 70th birthday. Here's a map showing what's happened. Of course, Putin's been talking about nukes, and everything's been ratcheting up since. This editorial from this morning, Putin is escalating at every turn. So, it's interesting. Everybody says, what's the implications for Bible prophecy? Because Israel's 1,000 miles away from here. Everybody's like all excited about, well, this shows, Ezekiel 38, 39 is going to happen soon. I'm not of that mind. I think it's a few years off. Russia's just not, if Russia is the Magog part of Ezekiel 38, and that's open to argument. So I'm not saying that people that say that are wrong. You can make the case. I think Turkey is a bigger player, and Turkey now has the pipeline things to Russia. Turkey seems to be very lucky. Their inflation rate is probably over 100%. There's a big black market in U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollar is very strong right now. People are still using dollars. China's having trouble. They're having, I was reading, and if you go to London along Hyde Park, there's these big mansions. The most expensive mansion in London sold for 230 million pounds 4 years ago. It was bought by the guy who is the CEO of Evergrande. He was worth $45 billion. He put it on the market this week. Never lived in it. And he put it on the market this week because Evergrande is collapsing. And so real estate is a big part of the Chinese economy. And Russia's having supply problems. So add 1,000 miles to their supply chain issue for their troops and everything. I know they can use air and that type of thing, and they have big planes, but I just think that they've got a problem in Ukraine, and they've called up 500,000 soldiers to take care of that. Now, they have private contractors, and the private contractors have been tweeting and putting on Telegram over the other days, look at these stupid Russians. We're much better than they are, the Wagner group. So, and the guy from Chechnya was pretty critical of what happened. Some of the Russian militaries were been fired. They've brought in the guy that was in charge of Syria. And so that's why they're obliterating Syria cities. That's what they did in Syria. So it's all very interesting. So I'm just not sure that Ezekiel 38, 39 is going to happen. Russia's got this big nuke sub. They have this, can't remember the name of it, and they have this Apocalypse torpedo that they can release, and it can sail around the world because it's nuclear powered, the torpedo. And some people think that they will torpedo the slopes, the western slopes of the Canary Islands, blow them up in an atomic blast, and there'll be a 200, 300, 1,200 foot tsunami that hits the east coast of the United States. It would be devastating if that happened. And that's the threat. So that's one thing. So I'll just do this very quickly. A lot of things going on in Israel. I think at one of the checkpoints around Jerusalem, a female soldier was stabbed and killed today by a guy got out of a car at the checkpoint. I remember when we were at some of these checkpoints in the Judea and Samaria. I don't like the term West Bank. The soldiers go, do you have a knife there in your camera bag? No, because they get stabbed at these checkpoints. I mean, here was an example this morning, and this young lady died. There were a couple other soldiers, I think, that were shot, maybe killed this week. There's a lot of turmoil in the Palestinian areas right now. And if you saw my interview with General Amir Avivi a week ago, Wednesday, we talked about that. That's up on the FBC YouTube channel. He's the founder and CEO of the Israeli Defense and Security Forum, a think tank that has about 5,000 retired IDF, Israeli Air Force, and Mossad officers in it that helps provide thoughtful analysis on security issues. So the other thing going on this week is this dispute about the maritime border between, you can see the little harbor there, that's Haifa, and you go up, there's Nahariya, which is the furthest north city in Israel. There we go. Nahariya is right here, and then the Lebanon border's right here. Beirut is up the coast, almost right there at the top. So I've gone over this a lot just to recap. So this is a document that was submitted by the Lebanese government to the UN and others that have been talking about the maritime border. And the maritime border, here's a little closer in shot of that. So you see the line that goes out from Lebanon, right here. It says line 23. Line 23, and then you have like 29 and 1. So this is the dispute. And the question is, where's the border going to be? Here's a little bit of graphic, because I did it. And it took me a while to put this together. So Israel's always said this is the northern border, and that's based on international law, the way international law determines things. Line 23 is what Lebanon claimed for a long time. The Hoff line is the State Department guy said, why don't you guys just compromise and split it up? And it was never an issue because this field here, the Kana field, it was clear that straddled the border. And so they've never really explored that. They don't really know exactly how much gas they have there. They brought in this drilling rig, this what they call an FPSO, from the company Energean that has the contract to do the drilling there. And there's a bunch of platforms down there in the Leviathan field, which is the big one down in the lower left, the red area. But then they discovered this Kerch field there near Block 72. And all of a sudden Lebanon goes, oh, well, wait a minute. Did we say line 23 was what we thought? Because if you look at line 23 doesn't bisect the Kerch field, it means shark. So we said, we meant line 29. And so now they've been negotiating, and this is Al Akbar, this is the Hezbollah-supported newspaper, and then there's this Al Manar channel. And they talk about, we've got Israel going, and it's a big political thing in Israel right now. And of course, our State Department weighs in and says, well, anybody who says that this is a bad deal, they just don't know what's going on. And nobody knows what's going on, even though this is an Israeli thing, and the Israeli left is hiding it from the people because there's an election coming up in a few weeks. And it's always interesting, the Al Manar channel, they always say the draft maritime agreement between the Zionist entity and Lebanon. They never use the word Israel. It's always the Zionist entity. And part of the dispute now goes along this is the border between Lebanon and Syria, between Lebanon and Israel. And there's some buoys off the coast. They call them the line of buoys. And now there's a big fight over where those buoys should be placed and who belongs this. Energean has come out and said earlier this week that they're ready to begin production. They've started, for lack of a better term, in the Kerch field, priming the pump. And a lot of people are concerned that if Israel, like on the Israeli left, well, if we don't enter into an agreement, they're going to go to the UN, and the UN never votes in our favor. So the UN will adopt line 29, so we have to enter into an agreement. And it's a big political issue in Israel right now. So look, here's the other deal. A lot of people think, okay, well, Israel gas, this is the one of the hooks in the jaw that Russia's going to want because their pipeline's been shut down to Europe. Not completely, but 2/3 of what they were sending to Europe was going to come through the Nord Stream pipeline. And that's shut down. They don't get the revenue from it. Israel entered into not a contract, but a memorandum of understanding in July with the EU to supply gas. So I looked up how many gas reserves, how much they have in reserves, like proven reserves. Israel was like 6 trillion cubic feet a few years ago. Now it's 40 trillion. So they found a lot of gas, and there may be more gas to find. Russia, though, that number is actually low. It's more like 1,700 trillion cubic feet of proven reserves. Russia's the largest gas reserves in the world. Iran, Qatar, United States. You see, Russia has about almost 25% of the world's gas reserves. It's interesting, too. Everybody says, we're running out of gas, peak oil, peak gas. We're running out. It's just, really? Well, consumption right now, with 8 billion people in the world, is less than 2% of the proven reserves on an annual basis. So Israel or Europe needs 155 billion cubic meters per year. And I just said Russia has 1,600 trillion, that's 1.6 quadrillion really, and Israel has 40 trillion. So Israel could supply all the gas. And so I think eventually they may. But I'm just saying they're not ready yet because they don't have any LNG facilities. They have access to part of Egypt's LNG facility, but they can only convert 1.6 billion cubic feet a year, and Israel's only getting a portion of that. So it has to be converted and put on a tanker like this, cooled to 160 degrees below zero, shipped. It's much more expensive to do it this way. And so what I'm saying is, I think Israel will eventually be in a position to do this. But right now, they're probably 2 years away because they're still ramping up production in these fields. It's either 40 or 60% of it is designated to go for domestic consumption. So, I mean, Israel has a lot of gas relative to its size. It's a big deal, but I just don't think that they're there. And then you have the Russians. This is a great editorial cartoon, I think, from the Financial Times a few weeks ago. Putin, in a ceremony in St. Petersburg, signed a new maritime doctrine for Israel. This was July 31st of this year. You see the defense minister there, Sergei Shoigu. So Putin signed this. Anyway, you don't need to watch all that. Big ceremony, St. Petersburg. I think there's a place here. Yeah, you see I think that's Peter the Great mural up there at this palace where he signed it. Now, this is Defense Minister Shoigu and some of the other people. And some of these guys may have resigned. I don't know. Here's a cover shot of the new naval doctrine. Big ceremony, a lot of articles written. This is the Valdai Discussion Club talking about what the new doctrine means. They say that it's strikingly different from the 2015 edition. The world described it seems much more disturbing and dangerous. Its potential for conflict has increased significantly. The expert who wrote this article said, boy, is that ever an understatement. Other people have written extensive articles about it. The one thing that seems to be clear from it is that Russia has kind of given up the Baltic and they've moved more towards the global south. The Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, where the bridge blew up, the Eastern Mediterranean, Pacific, and Arctic are now their focus. So they had already, a few months ago, said that we're kind of giving up on the Baltic, and then the pipelines under the Baltic blew up. There's a good article at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, and it sort of builds on those themes too, saying that the revised tech emphasizes worldwide conflict with the West. So you need to understand, this is the Russian mindset, is that we're in a worldwide conflict right now with us. And to be honest with you, I have trouble wrapping my head around why the United States would blow up the Baltic pipelines. It just doesn't make it. The only thing that it confirms in my mind is that if we did it, we have lunatics in charge. And I mean, Russia's the biggest nuclear power, and now they've annexed those regions, and they say, listen, the 2022 document demonstrates Russia's growing willingness to use military means to advance its aims. The Kremlin plans to improve its Navy's combat capabilities by considerably expanding its littoral infrastructure. In other words, we're going to build ships and that type of thing, but that's a problem because the shipbuilding that was done in the Soviet days was in Ukraine. They don't really have control of Ukraine right at the moment, and I don't think they're going to get ships out of there anytime soon. Talks about getting, better, bigger, more exploration for fossil fuels. So the new naval doctrine is a big deal. So I'm going to do one more thing. Oh, by the way, so why would we blow up the pipeline? Here's an article from today's Israel Hayom. And essentially it is Israel has made a direct threat to Lebanon. This is a French guy because the Lebanese company that will get gas for Lebanon is Total Energy, which is a French company. So that's why Macron's been very interested in this Eastern Mediterranean region. And so where is the EU going to get its gas? They're going to have shortages this year. They're going to have power blackouts, reduced power consumption. Industries are already shutting down. People are going to, I read someplace where in Germany, they estimate that maybe 1 million people could die from cold this winter if things don't change. This is not inconsequential. This is serious worldwide conflict, wars and rumors of wars. But interestingly enough, we had a LNG facility, liquefied natural gas facility, that was damaged in an explosion a few months ago. It's coming back online. It's located south of Houston on the Gulf Coast. And we have 2 new ones that are opening up that will be able to process natural gas and send it to Europe. But if they send gas to Europe, we don't get it, right? They're selling it to Europe. And a lot of these negotiations between Lebanon and Israel are being handled by this guy, Amos Hochstein. He works for the State Department. He's the energy expert. He worked there during the Obama administrations, the first 2 Obama administrations, and he is now back for the 3rd Obama administration. But look at what he did while he was during the Trump administration. What did Amos Hochstein do? Well, he worked in a library, right? He taught school. No, he was the executive vice president of the Houston-based energy company Tellurian. Remember I showed you the ad in the Wall Street or the New York Times full-page ad for Tellurian? What kind of company is that? Where he managed a global team in securing investments to develop new integrated LNG export facility in the United States. He is a former board member of the U.S.-India Business Council, the Atlantic Council, and Naftogaz of Ukraine. There's a big revolving door in Washington. So he was a lobbyist and a board member for Naftogaz from Ukraine. So, and I don't think he was getting a public surgery. Here's the president and CEO of Tellurian, and what's there behind her picture? What's there in her picture? A big LNG gas thing. Amazing how that works. So here's one thing I want to talk about, and I've talked about him a lot. This is Yaakov Katz's article from a week ago, Friday, September 30th, in the Jerusalem Post. It's an excellent article. Abdullah needs to stop spreading blood libels. On Tuesday, he says, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, I experienced a blood libel. Spending part of the holiday in the old city of Jerusalem, I went to a prayer service in the Muslim quarter in a building on El Wad Street, or what Jews call Rehov Hageh, the Hebrew word for gorge. The street runs from the Damascus Gate. If you've ever been into the Damascus Gate and you walk to the Western Wall, you've been down this street. A lot of us have walked that. The building where the services were held, which functions today as yeshiva and synagogue, was purchased in the late 1800s. In 1894, it became the home of the illustrious Toratheim Yeshiva, which trained some of the most famous rabbis of the last century. And it's in the Muslim Quarter. That's very interesting, and it's survived all of this time. But he's going on to say, I come out of the meeting from Rosh Hashanah, and by the way, he said the service was, I went there because it's a short service. It's only 2 hours long, so don't complain, right? Got a ways, they still got 25 minutes to go, but I'm not going to reach it. But he said they were saying we got to protect Al-Aqsa by sword. We will, with blood and fire, we will liberate Al-Aqsa. And he said Christian tour groups stood nearby watching as the woman yelled and snickered in our direction under the watchful eye of a nearby police contingent. One of the women at the front of the procession muttered something about the Yehuds, Jews in Arabic, standing nearby. As I watched the women march and chant words of hate and incitement, I immediately thought of the speech given just days before at the UN General Assembly by Jordanian King Abdullah, at which he said this.
My dear friends, a founding UN principle is the right to self-determination for all peoples. The Palestinian people, with their resilient national identity, cannot be denied this right.
His wife is Palestinian.
And the road forward is the two-state solution, in accordance with UN resolutions, a sovereign, viable, and independent Palestinian state on the 4th of June, 1967 lines, with East Jerusalem as its capital,
here comes the
living
blood
side
lines.
by side with Israel in peace and security and prosperity. Today, the future of Jerusalem is an urgent concern. The city is holy to billions of Muslims, Christians, and Jews around the world. Undermining Jerusalem's legal and historical status quo triggers global tensions and deepens religious divides. The holy city must not be a place for hatred and division. As custodians of Jerusalem's Muslim and Christian holy sites, we are committed to protecting their historical and legal status quo and to their safety and future. And as a Muslim leader, let me say clearly that we are committed to defending the rights, the precious heritage, and the historic identity of the Christian people of our region. Nowhere is that more important than in Jerusalem. Today, Christianity in the Holy City is under fire. The rights of churches in Jerusalem are threatened. This cannot continue. Christianity is vital to the past and present of our region and the Holy Land.
So one thing that's interesting in this speech, he actually mentions Israel and Jews, which he almost never does. That's a big change. I don't know if that makes something significant or not, but here is an article from the, I don't know, Jerusalem Post or Haaretz. Oh no, this is Arab News. Egypt Arab League lead new protest over Al-Aqsa incursion. Yeah, dude, Al-Aqsa is being invaded by the Jews. It's a blood libel. Okay, now this will probably get me banned from YouTube for the disturbing nature of the extreme things that happen in this video. I have two of them of storming Al-Aqsa. Here we go. Hold on to your seats. Pretty rough crowd, huh? storming Al-Aqsa. Here's some more. Fortunately, this one's a little further away. I don't think they felt safe taking the... You get the point. And Yaakov Katz's great article. I would get it. And then the other thing that's going on are there are protests going on in Iran. And if I do a midweek, I'll talk about that more next week. Again, reminder, tomorrow, 4:45 p.m. Eastern, 1:45 p.m. Pacific, live on Hope for Our Times with Tom Hughes. And we'll be talking about some of these topics, particularly the bridge. It's a big deal. I mean, this is not... The problem is you can't really predict what Putin's going to do. And he's got the biggest nuclear arsenal on the planet. And he said, I'll use them if I have to, if we're directly attacked or threatened. And I'm not bluffing. And I would take him at his word. So the world is in a very precarious place right now. But the protests in Iran, a big deal. Of course, Iran comes out and says, oh, this is by the U.S. and the Zionists. They're the ones who are doing all these protests in Iran. And I think it's significant enough that the regime is a bit threatened. So, let's see. I'll save the rest of this for later. So anyway, so look, interesting times, very turbulent world. Prepare your hearts. Eventually, our joy will be complete, but for now, there could be some troublesome times. So let's pray. Lord, I pray that you will arm us with your Holy Spirit, the armor of God, that you'll keep us centered on your word, give us opportunities to share the gospel with people so that they know that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the only thing that saves them. Believing that Jesus came, born of a virgin, lived a perfect life, was crucified for our sins, buried, rose again on the third day, ascended to heaven, coming back. Give us opportunities to share that good news with those around us and keep us anchored to you and the word, and guide us by your Holy Spirit. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.